This is July 23rd, 2012. This is for the monks. I've been asked to talk about a topic about child abuse and the 6 types of child abuse. What interests me, it saddens me and amuses me sometimes, but more saddens me than anything, is when I talk to men in sexual recovery and they say, you know, I've heard a lot of guys and they've been abused as children, but I was one of the lucky ones. And I say, really? I said, do you know what the 6 types of child abuse are? And they said, no. I said, well then, if you don't know what the 6 types of child abuse are, how do you know whether or not you were molested? We call that contempt prior to investigation in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So here the types are verbal abuse. Verbal abuse is the use of obscenity or profanity while expressing anger. It's perfectly okay for me to express anger, but not with the use of obscenity or profanity. My daughter, who's 25, going on 40, and I raised her myself, we used to have a fight contract so that we could be angry with each other when somebody felt hurt or violated or unjust, felt like something unjust. And so the contract was this: no hitting, no shaming, no blaming, no use of obscenity or profanity while expressing anger, and no fighting after 11 o'clock because everybody's tired. So, the first part is verbal abuse. If your father or mother was using obscenity or profanity when you were expressing their anger, you were verbally abused. Second type of abuse is emotional abuse. Emotional abuse has 3 parts: shaming, blaming, and controlling. Shaming is, you're no good. You'll never amount to anything. Blaming is, it's your fault. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have to work so hard all day. Blaming and shaming. And controlling is micromanaging, trying to make sure you do every decision just like I want you to, so that I feel safe. That's what it's really about. But I'm telling you, it's for your own good. So it's control, shame, and blame. If you experience one of those things, then you were emotionally abused. Now, Patrick Carnes, the great sexual researcher, says that 97% of sex acts were emotionally abused. That's if you leave the other 5 types out completely, we were emotionally abused. That's what he says, 97% of us. Emotional neglect. This is the one that catches everybody. Emotional neglect means if you didn't have this happen, if you came home from school and you said, Dad, you know, I'm feeling hurt and sad and lonely and needy because the boys at school, the new school we just moved to, I wanted to play with them and they wouldn't play with me because my bike was blue and their bikes were red, and they said I was no good and I feel disconnected and my need for love and belonging isn't met, and my self-esteem is damaged. And if your father didn't say, thank you for sharing that with me. Let me talk to you about how I feel. I had the same thing happen to me, and I was shamed and blamed and controlled by them when we moved, and I felt so angry about it. And if you need protection, I'll go down there and talk to them so they don't shame and blame you. Or we'll figure out another way so that you can get your need for love and belonging met while you're learning to integrate into this neighborhood. That's called being emotionally present for someone, which is what healthy relationships are all about. That's what I learned from women. It's about being connected emotionally. That's what life is about. But if you didn't have that, you were emotionally neglected. And I don't know anybody that I've ever met, addict or not, who did have that kind of emotional life and life in abundance growing up. So that means you were emotionally neglected. Patrick Carnes says that 2 out of 3 people, which is 200 million out of 300 million people, are either addicts or anons of addicts. 2 out of 3. So there's emotional neglect. Physical neglect. A lot of times, when I was growing up, I grew up military. My father said, you know, you have a roof over your head, you have food in your stomach, you have clothes on your back. Yeah. If you didn't have those things, you were physically neglected. A lot of people think, well, I wasn't physically neglected, so I wasn't abused. That's not true. But if you didn't have those things, and I know people who don't have those things, or didn't have those things, and I feel sad about that, but that's what physical neglect is. Physical abuse, hitting, pushing, shoving, hitting children for any reason, any kind of corporal punishment. Use of belts, hands, shoes, anything like that. That's physical abuse, period. So we have physical abuse, physical neglect, emotional abuse, emotional neglect, and verbal abuse, and finally sexual abuse. I've never met a sex act that wasn't sexually abused, not one. I've seen people who didn't do their family of origin work and weren't aware of it, but I've never seen one, not one, who wasn't sexually abused. How do you get to be 30 years old, 40 years old, and when you have a head cold, you want a blowjob? I mean, how does that seem as a treatment center? Because that sounds insane to me. That's not logical. That's not healthy thinking. It's not kind of funny sounding. But it's also real sad. How does a human brain get that way? How a human brain gets that way is when you're very young and your caretakers are sexual with you, or the friends of family are 30% of the abusers, is sexual with you, and then no one protects you, you begin to believe, or as I certainly begin to believe, and if you're like me, and you probably are, you wouldn't be looking at this, that the need for love and belonging is associated with an abuser. So when you need love and belonging, you go to some place where you can get sexually abused. And that's real sad. Those are the 6 types of child abuse. That's the bad news. The good news is that when I see sex addicts, I don't see people who can't stop having sex or can't stop thinking about sex. What I see is children who can't get the need for love and belonging met, who can't get the need for esteem from others, and can't esteem themselves, and can't get emotional and financial needs met. Those 3 needs, when those needs are not met, what we do is we reach for sex, love, romance, or relationship to comfort and nurture ourselves instead of doing healthy ways. It's not about sex. Sex addiction has nothing to do with sex. It's about people who can't get their needs met. It's children who can't get their needs met.